I move that the Leader of the Opposition have the opportunity to address the House for a period of 15 minutes to substantiate his claim that the Prime Minister has breached the laws of Western Australia, or if he cannot do so, to unreservedly apologise. Let's be very clear about what this motion is about and what the Leader of the Opposition just spectacularly failed to do in a halting, nervous and ultimately contentless performance. Let's be very clear about what he failed to do. This morning, the Leader of the Opposition went onto national television and accused me of committing a crime. That is what he did this morning. That is, he has gone out and made an allegation he can't possibly substantiate because it is untrue.
Are there any questions without notice? The Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, I move that so much of standing and sessional orders be suspended, as would allow the Leader of the Opposition to address the House for a period of 15 minutes to substantiate his claim that the Prime Minister has breached the laws of Western Australia, or if he cannot do so, to unreservedly apologise. That following the Leader of the Opposition address, the Prime Minister be given 15 minutes to reply. Speaker, Australians are rightly sick of sleaze and smear, rightly sick of the opposition's tactics of negativity, rightly sick of taking the time of this parliament not addressing issues.
The Prime Minister will resume her seat. The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. I am on my feet. I described that 2 minutes ago what would happen. They can't sit down. They actually aren't allowed to move while I'm on my feet, so please don't give gratuitous advice when you don't know what you're doing. The Manager of Opposition Business has the call.
Madam Speaker, the Opposition is more than happy to take this motion. We'll grant leave for a debate on this very subject right now.
The question is, the Prime Minister, if she could seek leave again.
Okay. I move that the Leader of the Opposition have the opportunity to address the House for a period of 15 minutes to substantiate his claim that the Prime Minister has breached the laws of Western Australia, or if he cannot do so, to unreservedly apologise. That following the Leader of the Opposition's address, the Prime Minister be given 15 minutes to reply. I presume that motion is carried and the 15 minutes starts now.
The Prime Minister is seeking leave. Leave being granted. I call the lead. I declare the motion carried. The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Madam Speaker, I have been saying for weeks now that I was prepared to give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the AWU corruption scandal, but that the nation needed to hear the Prime Minister's side of the story. Well, this week we have heard more of the Prime Minister's side of the story, but I have to say that the more we hear from the Prime Minister, the more obvious it is that she has been involved in unethical conduct and possibly unlawful behaviour. Let us look at the facts. Let us look at the facts, and these are the facts, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister,
the Minister for Climate Change and Energy Efficiency, the Leader of the House was asked to make this address. He should have the right to be heard in silence. The Leader of the Opposition.
As a partner at Slater and Gordon, the Prime Minister had 3 clients: Mr Blewett, Mr Wilson and the Australian Workers' Union, her boyfriend, his self-confessed bagman and their union. The Prime Minister advised 2 of those clients in setting up an association that turned out to be a vehicle for defrauding the 3rd client. She unceremoniously left the firm, and the AWU, one of the firm's most prestigious clients, dumped the firm. Now, the Prime Minister says she's consistently said that she has done nothing wrong. If there was nothing wrong here, if there was nothing to hide here, why did the Prime Minister never open a file? Why did she never disclose any of these activities to her partners?
The member for Isaacs is warned.
But it goes further than that, Madam Speaker. When queried by the Corporate Affairs Commission, the Prime Minister wrote to the Corporate Affairs Commission stating that the purpose of this association was workplace safety. But it wasn't workplace safety. We know that it wasn't workplace safety because the Prime Minister subsequently told her own partners that it was a slush fund pure and simple, a slush fund for the re-election of officers to the union, which subsequently turned out also to be a vehicle for defrauding the union. The Prime Minister, we know from the unredacted transcript released today, we know that she argued to the West Australian Corporate Affairs Commission that this organisation, this association, should be registered. Presumably, she said that it wholly complied with the law. Only it didn't. It didn't, because the law requires it to have at least 5 members, and the Prime Minister knew full well that the association had but 2 members. Now, Madam Speaker, let me make these fundamental points. First, it is highly unethical for a senior lawyer, a partner at a law firm, to provide misleading information to an official body such as the Corporate Affairs Commission of Western Australia. Second, it is actually illegal to provide false information to the Corporate Affairs Commission. The third point I make is that it is wrong for a Prime Minister to fail to give full and candid answers to this Parliament. It is wrong in ethics for any person in authority to cover up wrongdoing. Now, in this Parliament this week, on 5 separate occasions, the Prime Minister was asked about the representations that she had made to the West Australian Corporate Affairs Commission about the body which she knew was a slush fund. Did the Prime Minister come clean? Was the Prime Minister candid and honest? No. On every single occasion, the Prime Minister stonewalled or she engaged in unbecoming abuse of the questioner. And we now know why, because we have the unredacted transcript of her termination interview, her exit interview with Slater and Gordon. She had written to the Corporate Affairs Commission. She had argued for the incorporation of this association. She had represented that this was an association that could validly be registered under Western Australian law when she knew that it could not be, because she knew all along that this was a slush fund. A slush fund, a slush fund, a slush fund for the re-election of union officials. She created, or she was party to the creation of a slush fund on her own admission in her exit interview with Slater and Gordon. Madam Speaker, this whole exercise was a sham to facilitate a fraud, and the Prime Minister's involvement in it was this. She gave the advice, she made the representations that enabled the association to be incorporated, that facilitated the fraud. But the Prime Minister's wrongdoing didn't end there. She must have known after the exit interview that there was an abundance of problems here. She must have known because she terminated the relationship with Mr Wilson. She must have known that serious wrongdoing had taken place, that union money had been stolen. But instead of making a clean breast of this, instead of reporting this to the relevant authorities, she said nothing about it. She said nothing at all about it for years and years and years. And her silence meant that the fraud could continue. Her silence meant that more money that belonged legitimately to the Australian Workers' Union was siphoned off for the benefit of her by then former boyfriend and his bagman, Mr. Blewett. Now, at the very least, this is conduct unbecoming. It's unbecoming of a legal partner. It is unbecoming of a future Prime Minister of this country. The Prime Minister says she didn't know anything about the actual fraud at the time the fraud was being committed. She says that she didn't know anything at all about whether she was receiving any benefit from the fraud. Indeed, she categorically denies receiving any benefit from the fraud. Now, again, Madam Speaker, I am prepared to extend the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt. The problem is that where we have had the opportunity to test the Prime Minister's assertions against the documents, against the record, her assertions have turned out to be gravely lacking in truth and in substance. So the charge, Madam Speaker, is that the Prime Minister has been, at the very least, a dodgy and unethical lawyer. She's been an incompetent and an untrustworthy Prime Minister, as has been demonstrated abundantly by the evasions and the obfuscations that we have so consistently seen from this Prime Minister in the Parliament this week. But, Madam Speaker, this isn't just about an old scandal, corruption that dogged one union a long time ago. This is also about the ability of this government and this Prime Minister to stamp out union corruption wherever it occurs. Wherever it occurs. Because we know there is an echo, a very long echo, of the AWU corruption scandal and the Health Services Union scandal, which is taking place to this very day. We know that one of the Prime Minister's own MPs has been involved in gravely unethical conduct, has been involved in conduct in breach of the law, because the Fair Work Australia report into the Health Services Union states exactly that. And these aren't allegations, these aren't claims, these are findings from the government's own organisation, a quasi-judicial body, Fair Work Australia. We know that a former national president of the Australian Labor Party, Michael Williamson, the former boss of the Health Services Union, has been guilty of grave misconduct because, again, Fair Work Australia has found that to be so. The gentleman in question is now subject to serious charges. Madam Speaker, how can a Prime Minister and a government be expected to stamp out union corruption when senior members of the party and the government have been associated with union corruption themselves? Have been associated with union corruption themselves. As I said, let us, Madam Speaker, return to the nub of this. Return to the nub of this. The Prime Minister gave the advice. She provided the representations which enabled the incorporation of the body that facilitated the fraud. She made representations to the West Australian Corporate Affairs Commission that she knew were not justified. She made representations to the West Australian Corporate Affairs Commission that this was a body that had the requisite number of members, that had been established fundamentally for workplace safety, and she knew that this body was pure and simple a slush fund. So I say to the Prime Minister and to members opposite, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's have the judicial inquiry. Let's have the judicial inquiry that Mr Ian Cambridge, the then National Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union, was calling for at the time and has been calling for ever since. Let's have the judicial inquiry that quite a number of the Prime Minister's own backbenchers thought was warranted then and think is warranted now. Let's have the judicial inquiry that will finally get to the bottom of this whole squalid affair. And I have, for the benefit of the Prime Minister, some terms of reference, which I will gladly seek to table at the end of this time. But there is another issue, and that is an issue for members opposite. That is an issue for the Australian Labor Party.
The Minister for Climate Change and Energy Efficiency has warned.
Do members opposite wish to have leading their party? What kind of character and judgment and integrity do they expect of the person leading their party? Now, plainly, there has been unethical and illegal conduct here, an abundance of unethical, illegal conduct here. Much of it has been facilitated, at the very least, by the Prime Minister and the advice that she has given. And since this time, in the Parliament and elsewhere, she has consistently given evasive, misleading and obfuscating answers, and that, frankly, is conduct unbecoming of a Prime Minister of this country. It is conduct unbecoming of a Prime Minister of this country. So the question for members sitting behind the Prime Minister today, is she a fit and proper person to hold the Prime Ministership of our country? That's the question that they need to ask themselves. And, Madam Speaker, they can shout all they like today, but that is a question that will play on their consciences over the next couple of months until this Parliament comes back. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has clearly been preparing for this moment. I think we know what we can expect from the Prime Minister. We can expect more of the bluff and the verbal intimidation that she has practised throughout her career. I have this piece of advice for the Prime Minister. This is not about gender. This is about character. And, Prime Minister, you have failed the character test.
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker.
The Prime Minister resume his seat. The Leader of the Opposition is seeking leave to table the document. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And believe it or not, the Leader of the Opposition is such a negative human being that that's his version of an unreserved apology. Because the Leader of the Opposition this morning, and let's be very clear about what this motion is about and what the Leader of the Opposition just spectacularly failed to do in a halting, nervous and ultimately contentless performance. Let's be very clear about what he failed to do. This morning, the Leader of the Opposition went onto national television and accused me of committing a crime. That is what he did this morning. And no amount of screaming from the opposition changes the transcript. The Leader of the Opposition was on the Today Show and he said, I misled the WA Corporate Affairs Commission, and that is obviously a very serious matter. That would certainly appear to be a breach of the law. And then he went on at the end of the transcript to accuse me This is a Prime Minister who made false representations, who gave false information to the Corporate Affairs Commission, which allowed a fraudulent vehicle, allowed a vehicle to be established, which was then used for fraud. The Leader of the Opposition this morning out accusing me of a crime. Let's be very clear. And then at the behest of the Leader of the Opposition, the Manager of Opposition Business out calling for my resignation on the basis that I had committed a crime. Now, there is a problem with all of this for the Leader of the Opposition. We've seen this movie before. When leaders of the opposition overreach and go out and falsely accuse a Prime Minister of committing a crime, we've seen this movie before. And if he wants to see how the movie ends, turn round and look at the member for Wentworth, because we saw in the Godwin Grech affair what happens to a Leader of the Opposition who accuses a Prime Minister of a crime and cannot back it up. We see what happens to them in public esteem, and we see ultimately what happens to them in the eyes of their own political party. Earlier this week on Tuesday, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition knew how bad it was to make an error and accuse me of a crime when the opposition had no material to back it up. In the morning she did that, in the afternoon she was denying she had done it, and then she backflipped and said no, she didn't mean that at all. So the Deputy Leader of the Opposition engaging in a humiliating back down. But no such back down for the Leader of the Opposition today. He just went out and said that I had committed a crime. Now, we have given the Leader of the Opposition 15 minutes to make this allegation good. And where the Leader of the Opposition got to out of his 15 minutes is conduct unbecoming. That's where he's backed off to. Now, let me just explain to people exactly what has happened this morning. What has happened this morning is that there's no amount of screaming that changes the opposition leader's conduct, no amount of screaming that does that. What the opposition leader has done this morning is as follows. He has woken up, he has read a report in Fairfax newspapers, he has gone on television relying on that report with no other evidence or information at his disposal, and during the course of the morning Fairfax has corrected that report twice because it is wrong. The material the opposition sought to rely on this morning, the material the opposition leader sought to rely on this morning was an assertion about a transcript of interview between me and two partners of Slater and Gordon in 1995. Well, let me actually take people to that transcript of interview. Let's actually see what it says as opposed to the claims made by the Leader of the Opposition. The transcript of interview goes to a letter to the Western Australian Government Authority suggesting, the authority concerned, that the association which I provided legal advice on the incorporation of was a trade union and therefore ineligible for incorporation under that legislation, and that we had prepared a response, that is Slater and Gordon, submitted on Bruce Wilson's instructions to that authority, suggesting that in fact it wasn't a trade union and arguing the case for its incorporation. Well, whatever view people take of the facts of this matter, I've never heard anybody contend that the association is a trade union. Saying it's not a trade union is a simple matter of fact. A simple matter of fact. This was misreported in Fairfax this morning as me saying or writing that the association had no trade union links, and this was backed down by Fairfax once on its website and then backed down by Fairfax again on its website. Now, if this was just a debate between me as Prime Minister and Fairfax, that is something we would resolve outside this parliamentary chamber. That is not the point of having a parliamentary debate. The point of having a parliamentary debate is that the Leader of the Opposition, who is a rash man, who has never worried about the facts of this or any other matter, who is a man who clutches for negativity and sleaze whenever he can, read the newspapers this morning and without any further inquiry, without any skerrick of evidence, then went out and accused me of a crime. Based on a false report, the Leader of the Opposition accused me of a crime. Based on a false report, the member for Sturt called on me to resign. Based on a false report, the Opposition has been involved in this blitzkrieg this morning. Well, the problem for the Leader of the Opposition is this. 15 minutes he's just had to outline the facts and allegations on which he relies, and all of them are either spin or they are untruthful. Spin or untruthful. So let's just go through the things that the Leader of the Opposition has claimed in this place today which are untruthful. First, the Leader of the Opposition today has said in his parliamentary address that I told the Commissioner the association was dedicated to workplace safety. There's no evidence of this in the Slater and Gordon transcript, and he has not produced any letter to that effect. He says I was not honest in response to parliamentary questions about the letter to the Commissioner. That's not true, and I refer him to the Hansard. He says I knew the association could not be yesterday's Hansard. He says I knew the association could not be properly registered. That's false and unsubstantiated. He says I must have known there was wrongdoing but said nothing and that the fraud continued. He has not provided any evidence of that because no evidence could possibly exist because I didn't. The Leader of the Opposition, after all of these weeks, all of these months of smear, has had an opportunity today to put up, and he has not been able to do so. The Leader of the Opposition is now handcuffed to an allegation against me that I committed a crime, and he is handcuffed to the fact that he does not have any evidence of that. Now, a decent man would apologise for this cause of conduct. A decent man would recognise that he has gone too far, that he has made an error, that he has relied on a false report, that he cannot prove what is being said. If the Leader of the Opposition was a decent man, he would have used his 15 minutes to say, this morning he was wrong. But the Leader of the Opposition is not a decent man, and he is not a man who can be relied on to go to the facts of matters, not a man who can be relied to go on to the facts of matters. Yes, that interjection from the member for Sturt was very funny after the campaign the opposition's been involved in. The Leader of the Opposition does not look to facts, he just looks to sleaze and smear. Let's go right through this from the start. The Leader of the Opposition has accused me of a crime. He cannot evidence that. There is no evidence of it. That ought to be retracted. The member for Sturt is yelling about a letter he has not produced. Thank you. If I could, I know that the opposition doesn't like dealing with the facts. They like sleaze and smear. The opposition is dealing with and trying to make up allegations that it does not have any evidence for. The Leader of the Opposition contended a crime. He does not have any evidence of that. He based it on a false report. He should have apologised for that today. The Leader of the Opposition has then gone on to make up material about my state of knowledge about the association when I have been accurate and truthful about my state of knowledge of the association. The Leader of the Opposition has then gone on to make up allegations about the circumstances of the incorporation of the association and who was responsible responsible for what. I would remind the Leader of the Opposition that the application to incorporate the association was signed by Ralph Blewett. He took responsibility for it, his signature, and the person that the Deputy Leader of the Opposition is now in regular contact with. And so any questions about authority on the incorporation of the association is resolved by Ralph Blewett's signature on that document. So, after all of these months of sleaze and smear, the opposition, after all of these questions, now stands today in the circumstance where it cannot say to me anything stronger than it thinks that my conduct was unbecoming after all of these months of sleaze and smear. Any allegation beyond that they cannot substantiate, have not substantiated, have got wrong, and they have made things up. They've gone out into the court of public opinion and said that I am guilty of a crime and they cannot provide the evidence for it. Where does this take Australians to? Well, in my view, Madam Speaker, where this takes Australians to is you need to think very carefully about what this course of conduct says about the opposition leader's ability to show judgment and to deal with facts. Races out the door this morning with the most serious allegation you can make against a Prime Minister with no facts at his disposal. Races out the door this morning and does that. Comes into this parliament and given an opportunity to back it up, cannot back it up. If this is the way in which the Leader of the Opposition would deal with an allegation as serious as this, what does it say about his ability to deal with all of the public policy matters that people look to their political leadership to deal with? Can anybody imagine the Leader of the Opposition, with his track record of negativity, with his conduct today, being the sort of person who could carefully produce a health policy, an education policy, a jobs policy based on the facts, being the sort of person who would use his brain rather than his political brawn in the interests of the nation, the sort of person who would show policy strengths instead of policy weakness. The Leader of the Opposition throughout his time as leader, day after day, has demonstrated to the Australian people that he is someone good at insults, but there is never a moment when he produces a positive policy in the nation's interests. Never a time when he produces a file on health or education or jobs. All he ever has under his arm or under the arm of his staff members is a dirt file. That is who the Leader of the Opposition is. The Leader of the Opposition is someone who is using sleaze and smear because his political business model of fear has been going out of business. The Leader of the Opposition had hoped that after the 2010 election, if he caused enough chaos, he would be rewarded by the Prime Ministership. And then he had hoped that if he caused enough fear by carbon pricing, he would be rewarded with the Prime Ministership. Now, because those things transparently aren't working for the Leader of the Opposition the way he had hoped, here he is inserting sleaze and smear in the space, even though he does not have the facts available to him in order to back up his claims of sleaze and smear. Well, the Leader of the Opposition has had his opportunity to put up, having so frankly failed to put up. Now he should be shutting up. The only thing that should be coming out of his mouth is an apology for the false and defamatory allegation that he made against me this morning. And the only thing I can imagine coming out of the mouths of Australians is dismay that this Leader of the Opposition is so entrenched in negativity and smear that he can never lift his eyes to say anything positive about the nation's future.
I did want to recognise the kids in the House, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Fund, and say congratulations on another outing, and hopefully we will one day find a cure. Thanks for coming along. Are there any questions without notice? The Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. How can the Prime Minister claim that she never made false representations about the association when the application for incorporation states it is for the development of change to work to achieve safe workplaces. This is in her own handwriting. This is in her own handwriting. How can she claim that she made no false representations to the Corporate Affairs Commission of Western Australia?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And here we are, 15 minutes to put up or shut up, and where's he back to old allegations? 15 minutes to put up or shut up and back to old allegations. Here we go. The Leader of the Opposition had his opportunity to clearly state to the Australian people what I'd done wrong, and he manifestly failed to do so. I wait for the apology that should come from his performance on the Today Show this morning. The Leader of the Opposition
Prime Minister will return to the question.
The Leader of the Opposition well knows that in 1995, in an interview with Slater and Gordon, I answered questions about the incorporation of this association and its objects and purposes. The Leader of the Opposition and whoever shouted that is shouting an untruth into the Parliament.
The Prime Minister will resume her seat. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition put a very straightforward factual question to the Prime Minister, and she should be required to answer it, given that the document is in her own handwriting.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The Prime Minister has the call.
The Leader of the Opposition well knows that in a press conference in August I explained the objects and purposes of the association. I did that again at a press conference this week. The Leader of the Opposition should know that it is Ralph Blewett who sought the incorporation of this association, signed the form and took responsibility for then incorporating the association. The Leader of the Opposition should well know that the Commissioner then incorporated the association, obviously having been satisfied about the nature of the association and that it acquitted WA law. Any other statement by the Leader of the Opposition is sleaze and smear and untruth. A man who this morning alleged a crime, who today has backed down to conduct unbecoming and who now is just scrabbling around, grasping at straws to try and extricate himself from the fact that he's put himself in exactly the same position the member for Wentworth did with the Grech and Utegate affair. That is, he has gone out and made an allegation he can't possibly substantiate because it is untrue. As I have said on numerous occasions, I did nothing wrong in this matter, and no amount of sleaze and smear from the opposition will ever change those facts and that truth. And here we are today, no clear allegation even put by the opposition, so desperate are they. Well, I anticipate that the opposition today will keep in this bucket of mud because the truth is they don't know how to do anything else. They don't know how to talk about jobs, how to talk about education, how to talk about health. They can't be bothered coming to the chamber when we're introducing school funding legislation. They can't be bothered sitting in the chamber when we're introducing the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Day after day after day, this is a Leader of the Opposition who's sure full of political brawn. If you want someone to lift heavy weights, he's your man. What he'll never be able to do is lead this nation.
Expired. The Leader of the Opposition on a supplementary.
Yes, to the Prime Minister. How can the Prime Minister claim that she had absolutely nothing to do with the incorporation of the association when the transcript of her exit interview clearly shows that the incorporation only happened after specific additional representations by the Prime Minister?
The member's time. The Prime Minister has the call.
The Leader of the Opposition's just misled the Parliament about the nature of the material in the transcript that has been provided and is reported in newspapers today, in some newspapers entirely inaccurately. What that transcript goes to, and no amount of screaming changes words on a page, what that transcript goes to is dealing with a query as to whether or not this was a trade union. Well, it was not a trade union. Even in his wildest and darkest moments, when he's been out alleging crimes, the Leader of the Opposition has never said this body was a trade union. So, frankly, what's the Leader of the Opposition's point? What is his point? That the Commissioner asked whether or not a body was a trade union, and a body which was not a trade union was said not to be a trade union. What is his point? What is his point? That the Commissioner of Incorporated Associations in Western Australia satisfied him or herself that this association acquitted WA law and then incorporated it. Well, if he thinks the WA Commissioner has acted improperly, take it up with the WA Commissioner. If he thinks Ralph Blewett signed a form that he should not have, then get the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to get him on the phone or go and meet him in a coffee shop again and take up those matters. But do not come into this parliament and misread and misuse a transcript
Prime
from
Minister's
1995.
time has expired. The Leader of the Opposition is seeking to table the document.
I seek a subsequent supplementary.
The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
How can the Prime Minister persist in claiming that she had nothing to do with the incorporation when the exit interview shows clearly that she argued the case to the Corporate Affairs Commission? She argued the case for its incorporation, and her argument was what caused this association.
Expired. The Prime Minister has the call.
Once again, the Leader of the Opposition has misled the parliament. What caused the association to be incorporated is that the Commissioner for Incorporated Associations decided that it met the requirements of WA law and incorporated it. The Leader of the Opposition has also just misrepresented to the parliament the nature of the transcript of the Slater and Gordon interview, and I would ask him to not keep misrepresenting words on a page. The transcript goes to dealing with an inquiry about whether this body was a trade union. Well, even after all of these years, the best part of 20 years, the Leader of the Opposition, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, nobody says that this body was a trade union. The Leader of the Opposition misrepresenting the facts. And then the Leader of the Opposition really needs to get to the central issue here. Here he is trying to fudge one way and fudge the other. This morning he went out and accused me of a crime. Back it up or shut up.
The member for Hindmarsh has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. And my question is to the Prime Minister. How is the government working to transform the lives of people with disability, their families and carers? What difference will this make to people in my electorate of Hindmarsh so that they can live with choice and dignity?
Excuse me, the Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Hindmarsh for his question and thank him for raising a real issue of concern to Australians. What Australians know in this parliament is that real issues of concern to them will never be raised by the Liberal or the National parties. That all we will ever hear from them is sleaze and smear. That all we will ever hear from them is fear campaigning and negativity. Whilst they get on living in a mud bucket full of sleaze and smear, we are getting on with building the strong nation that Australians deserve and making sure that the benefits of a strong and resilient economy are shared, particularly with those Australians in the most need. I was appalled this morning when I introduced the National Disability Insurance Scheme legislation into this parliament that the Leader of the Opposition and the senior leadership of the Opposition were too busy with their mud bucket to even come in and support the introduction of that legislation. Too busy with the mud to come in and deal with the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Well, despite their disregard for people with disabilities, despite the fact that they so manifestly don't care, we on this side of the parliament are working hard to ensure a transformation in the way in which people with disabilities are supported in our community. We are bringing to the Australian community the next great Labor reform. Just like Medicare ended for all time the spectre that if you had a major illness in your family, that it could break family budgets, that you would not get the treatment you or your loved one needed. Just like Medicare ended that spectre for Australians in terms of illness, the National Disability Insurance Scheme will end that spectre for Australians in terms of disability. Now, if someone gets a profound disability, there would be precious few families in the nation who could fund the cost of providing care and support from private means. That means people are reliant on what is currently a fragmented and underfunded and patchwork system of support available to people in communities. That isn't good enough to give people with disabilities the options and choices that Australians should have. We want to make sure that Australians who are struck by disability, whether they're born with it, whether they acquire it, whether they get one of the most debilitating illnesses that progresses over a lifetime, that they get the kind of care and support they need. The legislation this morning is the foundation stone, the legal foundation stone of bringing this change for Australians. And, of course, we will launch the National Disability Insurance Scheme in sites around the country from the 1st of July, a great Labor reform, and we're proud of it. Yeah.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. I remind the Prime Minister of her confession to Slater and Gordon in her exit interview of conduct which appears to be in breach of the
Deputy Leader of the Opposition will resume her seat. The member for Isaacs on a point of order. Order.
Thank you, Speaker. I do raise a point of order. That simply argument is out of order. Should not form part of the question.
I was going to, at the end of the question, ask the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to rephrase the question. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has the call.
I remind the Prime Minister of her statement to Slater and Gordon in her exit interview of conduct which appears to be in breach of the WA Criminal Code sections 170, 409 and 558 and Associations Incorporation Act section 43. Does the Prime Minister expect to enjoy the confidence of this House now that the record of her exit interview shows that she misled the WA Corporate Affairs Commissioner into registering a sham association and has failed to reveal the truth about this matter in her statement to the House?
The member for Isaacs on a point of order.
I raise a point of order, Speaker, which is that this is the whole question simply argument. It is not substantiated. It cannot be substantiated. It's an assertion of without basis by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and cannot be properly put. It does not conform with the standing order.
The member for Isaacs will resume his seat. The question was full of argument. The question was full of argument, but so many of them have been this week, it's a bit difficult to rule which ones have been in or out of order. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And isn't it interesting that the Leader of the Opposition had 15 minutes to make an allegation out, 15 minutes to make an allegation out, and didn't go to these matters that the Deputy Leader raises. There she is with her sections of the legislation, waving them around, pretending again to be Miss Marple, while she's needing to make sure that she doesn't run into a television camera in Parliament House because she doesn't want to front up to the media for her lack of honesty about her dealings with Ralph Blewett. Well, let me just answer the Deputy Leader of the Opposition's question full of argument. She referred to an interview as an exit interview. To what is she possibly referring? If she's referring to the interview of Slater and Gordon in 1995, then why would she refer to it as an exit interview other than to mislead people, other than to mislead? Why would she refer to me misleading the Commissioner when that did not occur and she cannot make that out? And the transcript of the interview that I had in Slater and Gordon does not bear out that allegation. Why would she be in this parliament misleading about my state of knowledge about the association when I have answered that clearly in here and on the public record? Why is it that the opposition, having gone out there this morning and accused me of a crime, having not been able to back that allegation in here in Parliament today in a 15-minute address, is now using the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to make things up and put them in the most colourful and prejudicial terminology. What this is about is an opposition being absolutely at the bottom of the mud bucket, absolutely at the bottom of it. They've got nothing to raise that is substantive in any way. They are trapped into continuing to question on this matter this week because they are worried about how it will look. If they drop off these questions, it will look like their strategy's out of huff. Well, I've got news for the opposition. Even with them asking these questions today, even with the Leader of the Opposition's 15-minute address, or perhaps because of it, it is clear that their political strategy is out of huff. Clear that their political strategy is no longer working for them. Negativity got them a long way. They're hoping sleaze and smear will get them the rest of the way. But the problem is Australians now have an accurate assessment of the character of this man, and they don't like what they see. And Australians know that he will never have his Chief of Staff wandering round with a file that says jobs or health or education under her arm, because he will never have a positive policy for the nation's future. We'll get on with building that future. You live in the mud.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer the Prime Minister to her statement this week that she always witnessed documents properly when a partner at Slater & Gordon. As required under law, was the Prime Minister personally present when Ralph Blewett signed this power of attorney she drafted in favour of Bruce Wilson, and did that occur on the date specified in the document, and why hasn't she said that in her statement to the House?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much. To the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, I've said I did nothing wrong. To the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, I said I witnessed thousands of documents for clients as a lawyer, and I witnessed them properly. If the Deputy Leader of the Opposition wants to believe her newfound mate Ralph Blewett after he has confessed to being guilty of fraud—
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
On relevance, my question asked whether the Prime Minister was present.
Will resume her seat. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition will resume her seat. The Leader of the House will resume his seat. The Prime Minister was being relevant to the question. She has the call.
Thank you very much. And let me reiterate to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition that when I was a lawyer, I witnessed documents properly for clients. To the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, can I also say this, and to the Leader of the Opposition, here we have, with the yelling and the desperation, here we have the opposition very, very clearly showing that it hasn't learnt anything from the past. Can I remind the opposition about where it got itself to with the case of Godwin Grech? Let's remember, point number one, that started with secret meetings between senior Liberals and dodgy characters. Point number two, then there were unsubstantiated claims from a desperate leader, from an opposition leader trying to save his own skin. Then they went out and used the terminology documentary evidence, something that the Leader of the Opposition did today and the member for Wentworth did before him, documentary evidence.
The Prime Minister will return to the question.
And then when they're called on to actually make good on this evidence, they failed to do so. Here we are, a Godwin Grech moment for the Leader of the Opposition, and there the Deputy Leader of the Opposition is with her smear.
Her seat. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Madam Speaker, you just you asked the Prime Minister to return to the question. She completely ignored you and kept talking about something that's got nothing to do with the question. Was she there or wasn't she?
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The difficulty with the word relevance doesn't mean you're going to get the answer you want. And you have in mind often an answer you think is out there. It doesn't mean that someone is not being relevant to the entire question asked. The Prime Minister has the call and will refer to the question before the Chair.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And in terms of the question before the Chair, I have answered about how I witness documents as a lawyer, and this is the nature of sleaze and smear. That what you do is you come in and you just try and engage in these broad brush statements. As the Deputy Leader of the Opposition well knows, working as a lawyer, you witness hundreds and hundreds, indeed thousands of documents across a legal career. Now, anybody can engage in this sleaze and smear. I could stand here and say the Deputy Leader of the Opposition never properly witnessed a document during her legal career, not once, not ever, and she would need, presumably on current standards, to then disprove that for every document that she's ever engaged in as a lawyer. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I properly witness documents. If she wants to believe a fraudster, then that says something about the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. And if the Leader of the Opposition wants to wander around in the public domain on the one hand and say, we'll give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt, and then on the other hand go out with unsubstantiated allegations about me being engaged in major wrongdoing, then that says something about the opposition leader and his need for sleaze and smear to fill a political vacuum.
Will resume her seat. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition is seeking to table the document.
Madam Speaker, in order to jog the Prime Minister's memory, I seek leave to table this power of attorney drafted by the Prime Minister in favour of
the Deputy Leader of the Opposition will resume
with her signature on it.
her seat. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition will resume her seat. The Leader of the House has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. No, I table a more recent document from the Australian Abbott slush fund in inquiry sites.
The Leader of the House resume his seat. The member for North Sydney.
Madam Speaker, I was listening carefully to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. You did not provide her with an opportunity to even explain what the document was that she was seeking to table, in contrast with the Leader of the House. And therefore, how could they rule it out when they didn't even hear the document?
The member for North Sydney will resume his seat. It was the document the Deputy Leader of the Opposition described in her question. It had, because there would not be any other opportunity to present any other document. And I think she had waved it around sufficiently for me and everybody else to know which document it was. Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Given that the Prime Minister made the representations that established the AWU Workplace Reform Association that then enabled a fraud to occur, will she agree to establish a judicial inquiry that finally gets to the bottom of this union corruption scandal, as requested by Mr Ian Cambridge, now a Commissioner of Fair Work Australia?
The Prime Minister has the call.
We had 15 minutes for the Leader of the Opposition to outline one clear allegation against me, and he failed to do so. 15 minutes for the Leader of the Opposition to actually back in his spurious claims against me this morning. 15 minutes for the Leader of the Opposition to justify why he and his team have been in a mud bucket of sleaze and smear week after week, month after month. 15 minutes to justify.
The Prime Minister will resume her seat. The Manager of Opposition Business.
On relevance, Madam Speaker, she was asked whether she would support a judicial inquiry into this very grubby deal.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The Prime Minister has the call.
And there we have it, even on the interjection. More sleaze, more smear, more unsubstantiated allegations. 15 minutes to explain why his deputy didn't tell the truth publicly about her dealings with Ralph Blewett. 15 minutes to deal with these issues and spectacularly failed to do so. Well, no amount of carry-on, no amount of grasping for straws is going to change the fact that the Leader of the Opposition is drowning in a sea of sleaze and smear, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason why this man is drowning in that sea of sleaze and smear, and it is because he doesn't have one idea for the nation's future. Instead of wasting our time, as we are invited to do by the Leader of the Opposition, we'll get on with building great Labor reforms like the National Disability Insurance Scheme, using our time to improve the lives lives of the Australian people, something the Leader of the Opposition will never understand.
The member for Fraser. The member for Fraser has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on how the government is getting on with its policies and plans to help build Australia's future?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Fraser for his question, which is the last question of 2012. And as we move from 2012 into 2013, I want to say to my Labor colleagues and I want to say to members of the public listening to these parliamentary proceedings, we are proud of what our nation has achieved during 2012. We are proud of our nation and its achievements during the course of this year. As a government, we are proud that we have played our part working alongside the Australian people. We are proud that our economic stewardship has meant that people have got the benefit of jobs, unlike so many advanced economies around the world. We are proud that through the Asian Century White Paper, we have delivered a plan for our nation's future. We are proud that our budget discipline has meant that there is room for the Reserve Bank to move on monetary policy and that Australians are paying lower interest rates. We are proud that Australian families with a typical mortgage of $300,000 are now paying $4,500 less a year than they did when we came to government on their mortgage. We are proud that we have worked with Australian families on their cost of living challenges through benefits like the school kids bonus. We are proud we have changed our tax system so you don't pay a cent of tax on the first $18,200 that you earn. We are proud that we are readying our economy so we'll be winners in this century of growth and change. With the NBN, with skills, with traditional infrastructure, we are proud that we are getting ready to seize the future. We are proud of what we've done in health too, to make sure that people get benefits in dental care, rolling out GP super clinics, integrated cancer care. We are proud of our mental health reform agenda to help Australians who need mental health support at some time during their lives. We are proud of those changes which are Labor changes, and we are proud that we have set a program of work for 2013 which will be about making sure that every child gets a great education and a genuine opportunity in life, and making sure that we develop and deliver the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We are proud of these great Labor reforms, and we are proud that we have stared down in carbon pricing, the most reckless, negative campaign ever run in Australia's history. We are proud we are a government of change and building. We are ashamed to sit in a parliament with a man of negativity and sleaze and smear. We are ashamed that the opposition has not one plan for the nation's future, and in 2013 we'll come back ready to win the contest of ideas. You won't even be in the contest. And with those words, I place further questions.